Let's talk about microformats, which are structured data for the web that get used as metadata. Now, microformats are markup, so really extensions to HTML that allow you to embed data, embed semantic data into web pages. And by semantics, we mean a couple of different things, related but different. By semantics, we mean meaning that's meaningful to humans. For example, your computer does not care that a particular date and time is the date and time of, say, your anniversary dinner. So to you, that's a very important date and time, not an event to miss. You care about that particular date and time. As far as your computer is concerned, one date and time is the same as any other. As long as it's formatted in ISO 8601 or whatever, it's all good, right? The semantics are there in your interpretation, not in the software. But by semantics, we also mean instructions that are meaningful to algorithms, so that rules can be developed for how a piece of software should handle certain types of data, which then in turn is helpful to the human users of that software. So on the one hand, we mean human meaning. On the other hand, we mean algorithmic meaning, although meaning is probably the wrong term to use there, but by analogy. By semantics, we also mean, as opposed to syntax. Writing HTML is one thing, but that's just using the syntax of the markup language, including data in that HTML that helps software and humans interpret the documents on the web that are written in HTML. That's semantics. So we have that distinction as well, the semantics versus syntax distinction. Now, we've talked about the semantic web a little bit already, and we'll talk more about it later. We're kind of working our way back up to it. So let's start with microformats that you may already be familiar with. At least you've probably seen them in action, even if you weren't aware at the time of what it was that you were seeing. The first microformat we're going to look at is hCalendar, which, as you would probably expect from the name, is a way to encode calendar-related semantics into a web document. Now, the good people at the Microformats website have developed an hCalendar creator, and I have populated that creator with some data already. So let's take a look at that. First, we have the summary, which I've said is this MOOC Unit 5. Location is Chapel Hill, which really isn't actually true because a MOOC doesn't actually happen in any particular location, but I just filled it in for the sake of an example. The URL is the URL of the course. Well, this is unfortunate. It reset my date and my time zone. But you see that there's a start and an end date and a time zone, and then a description, which is the description from my course site on Coursera, and then a few tags. This is the code that gets generated by the hCalendar creator. And since that's really small and all kind of cramped together, I've copy and pasted that onto a slide to make it a little bit easier to read. So let's do that. Now, here's the code that I copy and pasted from the hCalendar creator. So the first thing to notice is that there is a div container, and div is an HTML tag that defines a section, a division, in an HTML document. So it starts here and it ends here, and notice that there are other divs inside the larger div. So this whole block is contained in a div, and this whole block is contained in a div as well. the class of this whole block is vEvent. And the ID is hCalendar Metadata MOOC Unit 5. So it took the name of the event that I created and created an ID from it with the hCalendar prefix. vEvent declares that this is an event and that is the ID for it. Class is a standard attribute of HTML elements. So in a sense, hCalendar is really just a predefined set of classes that you can insert into standard HTML code. So href is the standard way to declare a link in HTML. So there is the link. This is the URL for this course. And in hCalendar, the class equals URL attribute is added to indicate that this is the URL for some thing on the web, some resource on the web that's associated with this event. Then we have div class description, and we get this block, which is the description that I wrote, or in this case copy and pasted, for this unit, for this event. Then we have div categories, and then span class category. Again, span class category, and the tags, metadata, microformats, and awesome. Span is an HTML tag that allows you to combine pieces of data. Metadata in the span is distinct from microformats in its own span, but they're all brought together by being contained within the same div. Now again, we have another span, two other spans actually. We have span class equals summary, and then the summary of the event, and then span class location Chapel Hill. So two spans, two pieces of information contained within span tags that are brought together as being associated. Event at location. And now we have a non-standard tag, time. That is not a standard HTML tag. So we have time class date start, time class date end. So the start and end times for this event, and then the attribute date time, and the start and end date and time in ISO 8601, and then the start and end dates and times in human readable form. So what we have here is a combination of standard HTML elements and attributes and custom elements and attributes like time and date time that are being used to represent an event. All of the things that you might want to say about an event: start date, end date, description, location, etc. So now let's look at an example of an hCalendar event in the wild. This page is the events page on the University of Washington at Seattle's website. The University of Washington at Seattle has an information science program that is similar in many ways to my home institution. And as it happens, UW's iSchool uses hCalendar for their events. So let's pick an event that is in the future, so we might actually go to it. InfoCamp 2013, whatever that is. So there's the description of InfoCamp 2013, and you'll notice this little calendar icon over here. So if I click on that, I get a pop-down menu with a pop-down with a URL in it, and that URL ends in .ics, notice. So if I copy and paste that URL, I can now go to my calendar and I can add a subscription to that event. Click on subscribe, and now I get this window with the details of that event. Okay, and there it is. InfoCamp 2013 has now been added to my calendar. Why? Because the iSchool at the University of Washington has provided a URL, and at that URL you have a file, a .ics file, that uses hCalendar format. I grabbed that URL, I gave it to my calendar. My calendar knows how to interpret hCalendar microformats so that it then just simply imports all of that metadata into the calendar and creates an event for it. And you've probably seen this many times because many calendar applications support the hCalendar microformats.